Commander Elena Vasquez never imagined that saving 12 submarine crews would be the crime that branded her a traitor to the very Navy she'd served for 18 years. But when those same submarines surfaced simultaneously across 3 oceans, breaking decades of protocol to broadcast her innocence to the world, she realized that sometimes the truth runs deeper than any ocean trench. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The morning fog rolled across Naval Base Coronado like a gray shroud, muffling the sounds of the Pacific Fleet's morning operations. Elena stood at the harbor's edge, watching the USS Montana disappear beneath the waves for what she believed would be a routine training exercise. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but she hadn't noticed. Something about today felt different, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. The communication center buzzed with unusual activity as she made her way across the base. Normally, the overnight watch would be winding down their shift, preparing to hand over operations to the day crew. Instead, technicians hunched over their stations with an intensity that spoke of crisis management rather than routine operations. Radio chatter filled the air and hushed, urgent tones that made Elena's trained ear prick up with concern. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez emerged from the communications hub, his weathered face creased with worry lines that hadn't been there the day before. He'd served under Elena's command for 6 years, first aboard the USS Seawolf and later during her assignment to submarine fleet operations. Their professional relationship had evolved into mutual respect, built on countless missions where split-second decisions meant the difference between success and catastrophe. "Morning, Commander," Rodriguez said, but his usual easy confidence was replaced by something that looked suspiciously like sympathy. "Admiral Morrison wants to see you in his office. Says it's urgent." Elena studied his expression, noting the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. In the submarine service, eye contact was everything. It conveyed trust, competence, and solidarity in the face of danger. When experienced sailors looked away, it usually meant trouble was surfacing fast. "What's the nature of the urgency, Chief?" Rodriguez glanced around the communication center, then leaned closer. "Ma'am, I don't know the details, but there's been a lot of encrypted traffic coming in from Washington. High-priority stuff that's way above my clearance level, and ... He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Some of the senior staff have been asking questions about your recent project assignments. The submarine modification project." Elena's stomach tightened as she realized what Rodriguez might be referring to. For the past 8 months, she'd been leading a classified initiative to upgrade communication systems across the Pacific Fleet's submarine force. The project involved installing new encryption protocols and emergency broadcast capabilities that would allow submarines to communicate directly with each other without routing through traditional command structures. The modifications were designed to improve operational security and provide redundant communication pathways in case primary systems were compromised. Elena had personally overseen the installation aboard 12 different submarines, working closely with their crews to ensure the new systems integrated seamlessly with existing protocols. The project had been approved at the highest levels of Naval Command and represented a significant advancement in submarine warfare capabilities, but classified projects had a way of becoming political weapons when the wrong people decided they needed scapegoats. "Thank you for the heads up, Chief," Elena said, her voice maintaining the calm authority that had carried her through 17 years of submarine operations. "Keep monitoring the communications traffic. If anything unusual comes through, I want to know about it immediately." The walk to Admiral Morrison's office felt longer than usual, despite Elena's familiarity with every corridor and passageway on the base. She'd made this journey hundreds of times over the past 3 years, usually for routine briefings or operational planning sessions. Morrison was a fair commander who valued competence over politics, which had made their professional relationship both productive and comfortable. Today, however, the base felt different. Personnel she passed in the hallways offered perfunctory nods rather than their usual friendly greetings. Conversations stopped when she approached, resuming in hushed tones after she'd passed. The subtle changes in behavior triggered alarm bells honed by years of submarine service. Where reading social dynamics could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure, Admiral Morrison's outer office was unusually crowded with senior staff members who seemed to be waiting for something. Captain Hendricks from Naval Intelligence stood near the window, his presence immediately raising Elena's concern level. Intelligence officers didn't attend routine meetings, and Hendricks had a reputation for appearing only when careers were about to be destroyed or national security was at stake. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun, Morrison's aide, looked up from her desk with an expression that confirmed Elena's growing suspicions. Chun had served as her communications officer aboard the USS Virginia before transferring to staff duties, and their friendship had survived the transition from operational commands to shore assignments. The worry in Chun's eyes was unmistakable. "The Admiral is waiting for you, Commander," Chun said formally, but her slight emphasis on Elena's rank carried a warning that only years of shared service could convey. In the submarine community, formality often preceded bad news. Morrison's office overlooked the harbor, providing a panoramic view of the Pacific Fleet's operations. Under normal circumstances, Elena found the sight of submarines and surface vessels reassuring, a visible reminder of American naval power and her role in maintaining it. Today, the harbor looked different, almost ominous, as if the ships themselves were witnesses to some unfolding drama she didn't yet understand. Admiral Morrison stood with his back to the door, studying the harbor through his office window. His uniform was impeccable as always, but something in his posture suggested a man carrying an unwelcome burden. After 32 years of naval service, Morrison had developed an instinct for recognizing career-ending moments, and his body language suggested they were about to experience one. "Close the door, Elena," Morrison said without turning around. The use of her first name in an official setting was another warning sign. In the Navy's rigid hierarchy, casual address usually indicated either exceptional news or exceptional trouble. "Captain." Hendricks moved away from his position near the window, settling into one of the chairs facing Morrison's desk. His presence transformed what Elena had hoped would be a routine meeting into something that resembled a tribunal. Intelligence officers brought evidence, not conversation, and Hendricks carried a thick folder that looked heavy with implications. "Sir," Elena said, remaining at attention until invited to sit. Military protocol provided structure in uncertain situations, and she clung to that structure as her primary defense against whatever was coming. Morrison finally turned, his weathered face showing the strain of command decisions that kept him awake at night. He'd been Elena's mentor during her early submarine assignments, recognizing her potential for leadership and recommending her for increasingly challenging positions. Their relationship had been built on mutual respect and shared commitment to naval excellence. "Sit down, Elena. We need to discuss your involvement in the submarine communication upgrade project." Elena took the offered chair, her mind racing through every aspect of the project she'd managed. The installation had proceeded according to schedule across all 12 submarines. Each system had been tested and certified before being declared operational. Documentation had been filed according to protocol, and progress reports had been submitted to the appropriate oversight committees. "Sir, the project has been completed successfully. All systems are operational and performing within specified parameters. Is there a specific concern about the implementation?" Hendricks opened his folder and extracted a series of photographs. The images showed submarine communication equipment, but the angle and lighting suggested they had been taken covertly rather than as part of official documentation. Someone had been conducting surveillance on Elena's project without her knowledge. "Commander Vasquez," Hendricks said, his voice carrying the cold precision of an intelligence officer building a case. "We have evidence suggesting that the communication modifications you supervised may have been compromised by foreign intelligence services. Specifically, we believe that sensitive technical specifications were transmitted to hostile governments during the installation process." The accusation hit Elena like a depth charge detonating at close range. For a moment, she couldn't process the implications of what Hendricks was suggesting. The idea that she would betray her country, her navy, and her fellow submariners was so fundamentally incompatible with everything she believed that her mind initially rejected it as impossible. "Sir, that's absolutely untrue. Every aspect of the project was conducted under strict security protocols. All personnel were cleared through appropriate channels, and all technical specifications remained within authorized security boundaries." Morrison's expression remained neutral, but Elena caught a flicker of something that might have been regret. "Elena, I've known you for over a decade. I've watched you command submarines in hostile waters and lead complex operations under extreme pressure. If someone had told me yesterday that you were capable of treason, I would have dismissed the accusation without consideration." The word "yesterday" carried ominous implications. Something had changed in the past 24 hours, something significant enough to transform Elena from a trusted officer into a suspected traitor. Hendricks placed another photograph on the desk. This one showed Elena in conversation with a man she didn't recognize, apparently taken during her off-duty hours at a civilian restaurant. The image quality suggested professional surveillance equipment, and the angle indicated it had been captured without her knowledge or consent. "Do you recognize this individual, Commander?" Elena studied the photograph carefully, searching her memory for any recollection of the meeting. The man appeared to be in his 40s, with dark hair and European features, but his face triggered no recognition. She'd attended dozens of social and professional gatherings over the past year, meeting countless civilians and military personnel in various contexts. "No, sir, I don't recall meeting this person. His name is Viktor Petrov." Hendricks continued. "He's a known intelligence operative with the Russian Navy, specializing in submarine warfare technology. This photograph was taken 3 weeks ago at a restaurant in San Diego. According to our surveillance, you had an extensive conversation lasting approximately 90 minutes. Elena felt the room spinning slightly as the implications of the accusation became clear. Someone was building a case for espionage, using photographs and circumstantial evidence to create a narrative of betrayal. The precision of the surveillance suggested a long-term operation designed to entrap her, though she couldn't understand why she had been targeted. "Sir, I have no memory of this meeting. I would never knowingly associate with foreign intelligence operatives, and I certainly would never discuss classified information with unauthorized personnel." Morrison leaned forward, his expression showing the weight of command decisions that could destroy careers and lives. "Elena, the evidence is compelling. The timing of this meeting coincides with the completion of your communication system installations. Technical specifications from your project have appeared in Russian naval intelligence reports. And now we have photographic evidence of contact with a known operative." The trap was closing with mechanical precision, and Elena realized she was facing something far more sophisticated than a simple misunderstanding. Someone had orchestrated this carefully, using her legitimate project activities as cover for creating false evidence of treason. The question was who had that level of access and authority, and why they had chosen her as their target. "Admiral, I request permission to review all documentation related to this investigation. I also request legal representation and formal charges if they're being contemplated." Hendricks and Morrison exchanged a look that confirmed Elena's worst fears. This wasn't a preliminary inquiry or a routine security review. This was a formal investigation with predetermined conclusions, and her requests for due process were being noted rather than honored. "Commander Vasquez," Morrison said formally, his use of her rank signaling a return to official protocol, effective immediately. "You are suspended from all duties pending a complete investigation into your activities. Your security clearances are revoked, and you are confined to base until this matter is resolved." The words fell like hammers, each one driving home the reality of her situation. In a matter of minutes, she had been transformed from a respected submarine commander into a suspected traitor under house arrest. 18 years of exemplary service had been erased by photographs and circumstantial evidence that she couldn't explain or refute. "Sir, I believe I'm being framed by someone with access to classified information and the ability to manipulate security protocols. I request a thorough investigation into who had knowledge of my project timeline and access to Russian intelligence services." Morrison stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Elena, I hope you're right. I hope there's an explanation that clears your name and restores your reputation. But until we have that explanation, my hands are tied. Security will escort you to temporary quarters where you'll remain until this investigation is complete." As Elena left the Admiral's office under escort, she caught one last glimpse of the harbor through Morrison's window. Somewhere beneath those waters, 12 submarines were operating with communication systems she had personally installed and certified. Those submarines represented the pinnacle of American naval technology, crewed by sailors who trusted their lives to equipment and protocols she had helped design. If she was truly being framed, then those submarines and their crews were potentially at risk from whatever conspiracy had targeted her. The thought of American sailors being endangered by her unknowing participation in some larger scheme filled Elena with a determination that transcended her own predicament. She would find the truth, clear her name, and protect the submarines and crews who depended on the systems she had installed, even if it meant challenging the very institution she had served faithfully for 18 years. The temporary quarters assigned to Elena were located in the base's guest housing facility, a sterile complex normally reserved for visiting dignitaries and officers awaiting permanent assignments. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was being treated like a foreign visitor in the place she had called home for 3 years. 2 security personnel stationed themselves outside her door with the kind of professional courtesy that made their surveillance role unmistakable. Elena's personal belongings had been confiscated during what the security team politely termed a routine inspection. Her laptop, cell phone, and any documents related to her work had disappeared into evidence bags, leaving her isolated from both personal contacts and professional resources. The systematic removal of her connection to the outside world felt deliberate, designed to increase her sense of vulnerability and dependence on her captors. Goodwill. The room itself was spartanly furnished with military-issue furniture that prioritized function over comfort. A single window looked out onto a maintenance area where she could observe the daily operations of base personnel going about their duties. Watching the familiar routines of naval life from behind glass felt like observing her former existence from another dimension. Commander Jake Sullivan arrived at her quarters 3 hours after her confinement began, carrying himself with the measured confidence of an officer accustomed to handling sensitive situations. Elena recognized him from joint training exercises, though their professional paths had rarely intersected during their respective submarine careers. His presence suggested that her case was being handled by personnel specifically chosen for their lack of personal connection to her. "Commander Vasquez," Sullivan said, settling into the room's single chair while Elena remained standing near the window. "I've been assigned as the investigating officer for your case. I want to ensure you understand both your rights and the seriousness of the charges being considered." Elena studied Sullivan's expression, searching for any indication of his personal opinion about her guilt or innocence. His face revealed nothing beyond professional competence and careful neutrality. In the submarine service, officers learn to mask their thoughts during crisis situations, and Sullivan was clearly applying those skills to their current interaction. Commander Sullivan, I appreciate your assignment to this case. I want to cooperate fully with any legitimate investigation, but I also want to ensure that proper procedures are being followed. The accusations against me are not only false but potentially dangerous to ongoing naval operations. Sullivan opened a folder containing what appeared to be surveillance reports and technical documentation. The thickness of the file suggested that the investigation into her activities had been ongoing for weeks or possibly months before her arrest. Someone had been building a case against her with methodical precision, gathering evidence while she remained completely unaware of their scrutiny. Let's start with your submarine communication project, Sullivan said, removing a technical schematic that Elena immediately recognized as classified material. This system allows submarines to communicate directly with each other without routing, through standard command channels. Can you explain the operational necessity for this capability? Elena considered her response carefully, aware that every word would be analyzed for potential evidence of criminal intent. The communication system had been designed to enhance operational security, but she could see how its capabilities might be interpreted as facilitating unauthorized activities if viewed through a suspicious lens. The system provides redundant communication pathways in case primary channels are compromised by hostile action or technical failure. Submarines operating in contested waters need multiple options for maintaining contact with friendly forces. The direct communication capability ensures that crews can coordinate rescue operations or tactical responses, even if shore-based command structures are temporarily unavailable. Sullivan made notes while she spoke, his pen moving with the deliberate strokes of someone creating an official record. And who had access to the technical specifications for this system? The project team included 12 submarine communication officers, 6 naval engineers, 3 security specialists, and myself as project coordinator. All personnel held appropriate clearances and were briefed on security protocols. Additionally, shore-based technical support staff had limited access to specific components of the system. How many of these individuals had access to complete system specifications? Elena realized the direction of Sullivan's questioning and felt a chill of recognition. Someone was looking for the source of the alleged intelligence leak, and her position as project coordinator made her the most obvious suspect. The fact that she had comprehensive knowledge of all system components would be presented as evidence of her ability to compromise the entire project. As project coordinator, I had complete access to all specifications. However, the technical documentation was compartmentalized, with individual team members having access only to components relevant to their specific responsibilities. No single person other than myself had complete system knowledge. Sullivan leaned back in his chair, his expression becoming more focused. That's interesting, Commander. Because according to our intelligence sources, someone provided complete system specifications to Russian naval intelligence. If you're correct about the compartmentalized access, then you would be the only person capable of compromising the entire project. The logical trap was elegant in its simplicity. Elena's legitimate authority and comprehensive knowledge were being transformed into evidence of her guilt. Someone had carefully structured the project's security protocols to ensure that she would become the primary suspect if any information was leaked to foreign governments. Commander Sullivan, I believe someone is deliberately framing me for crimes I didn't commit. The timing of this investigation, the specific nature of the evidence, and the systematic isolation of me from potential supporters suggests a coordinated effort to destroy my career and reputation. Sullivan's expression remained neutral, but Elena detected a slight shift in his posture that suggested her words had resonated somehow. That's a serious accusation, Commander. Are you suggesting that personnel within the U.S. Navy are engaged in a conspiracy against you? I'm suggesting that someone with access to classified information and knowledge of naval security protocols has created false evidence to make me appear guilty of treason. I don't know who or why, but the precision of this operation indicates sophisticated planning and inside knowledge. Sullivan closed his folder and stood, his body language suggesting the formal portion of their interview was concluding. However, he paused at the door, glancing back with an expression that seemed almost sympathetic. Commander, I want you to know that this investigation will be thorough and fair. If you're innocent, the evidence will eventually prove that. But I also want you to understand the gravity of your situation. The charges being considered include violation of the Espionage Act, treason, and conspiracy to commit acts of sabotage against U.S. naval forces. The formal charges hit Elena like physical blows, each one carrying the potential for decades in federal prison or worse. She had known the investigation was serious, but hearing the specific accusations made the threat to her life and freedom terrifyingly real. I understand the charges, Commander. I also understand that someone has gone to considerable effort to ensure I appear guilty. I request permission to review all evidence against me and to consult with legal counsel. Your requests have been noted and will be considered through appropriate channels, Sullivan replied, his language indicating that her requests would likely be denied or delayed indefinitely. After Sullivan's departure, Elena found herself alone with her thoughts and growing sense of urgency. Someone had targeted her specifically, using her legitimate work as cover for creating false evidence of treason. The precision of the operation suggested either extensive planning or inside knowledge of her activities, possibly both. The submarine communication project had been approved by Admiral Morrison and overseen by multiple layers of naval command. The idea that foreign intelligence services had somehow infiltrated the project seemed unlikely given the extensive security measures in place. More probable was the possibility that someone within the naval hierarchy was deliberately leaking information while ensuring that Elena would be blamed for their actions. Elena began mentally reviewing every aspect of the project, searching for moments when someone could have gained unauthorized access to technical specifications. The installation process had required her to work closely with submarine crews across the Pacific Fleet, providing numerous opportunities for someone to observe her activities and document her access to sensitive systems. The photograph of her alleged meeting with Viktor Petrov troubled her most. She had no memory of the encounter, but the image appeared genuine rather than digitally manipulated. Either she was suffering from selective memory loss, or someone had created a sophisticated false meeting using advanced surveillance techniques. The possibility that she was losing her memory seemed unlikely given her otherwise clear recollection of recent events. More disturbing was the implication that someone had the capability to create convincing photographic evidence of meetings that never occurred. Such technology existed, but it was typically available only to intelligence agencies with significant resources and technical expertise. Elena realized that her situation was far more complex than a simple case of mistaken identity or bureaucratic error. Someone with access to advanced surveillance technology and detailed knowledge of naval security protocols had targeted her specifically. The question was whether she was a random victim or whether something about her background or activities had made her a particular threat to their operations. The sound of aircraft operations outside her window provided a constant reminder of the military world continuing without her participation. Fighter jets launched from the base's airfield while submarines moved in and out of the harbor, conducting operations that she had helped plan and coordinate until this morning. Her sudden exclusion from these activities felt like being cut off from oxygen. As evening approached, Elena noticed unusual activity around the harbor. Additional security personnel had been deployed to the submarine piers and communication. Antennas that were normally retracted during port operations remained extended. The heightened security posture suggested that her arrest was part of a larger operational concern rather than an isolated personnel issue. Lieutenant Commander Chun appeared at her door just after sunset, accompanied by one of the security guards, who had been monitoring Elena's quarters. Chun's presence was unexpected, but welcome, offering the first friendly face Elena had seen since her confinement began. "Elena," Chun said quietly, glancing at the security guard who remained within hearing distance. "I wanted to check on your welfare and see if you needed anything from your personal quarters." Elena understood that Chun's visit was probably official rather than personal, but she appreciated the gesture regardless. In the submarine community, maintaining connections with fellow officers was essential for both professional and emotional survival. "Thank you, Sarah. I'm managing well enough under the circumstances. Have there been any developments in the investigation that you're aware of?" Chun's expression became carefully neutral, suggesting she was aware of information she couldn't share directly. "The investigation is ongoing. I've been asked to ensure you're receiving appropriate treatment and that your basic needs are being met." The formal language indicated that their conversation was being monitored and recorded for potential use in legal proceedings. Elena understood that Chun was walking the careful line between professional duty and personal loyalty, trying to provide support without compromising her own career. "I appreciate your concern, Sarah. I want you to know that I'm confident the truth will eventually emerge. I also want you to be careful about your association with me until this matter is resolved. I wouldn't want your career to be damaged by my situation." Chun nodded slightly, acknowledging both the warning and Elena's consideration for her welfare. "Is there anything specific you need? Any messages you want conveyed to appropriate personnel?" Elena considered the question carefully, aware that anything she said would be reported to the investigation team. However, she also recognized this might be her only opportunity to communicate concerns about operational security that extended beyond her personal situation. "Please ensure that all submarines equipped with the new communication systems are maintaining proper security protocols. If there are legitimate concerns about system compromise, those boats and their crews need appropriate protection. Their safety is more important than any individual case." Chun's expression showed understanding of Elena's priorities. Even under arrest and facing charges of treason, Elena's primary concern remained the welfare of the submarine crews who depended on systems she had helped install. This focus on operational rather than personal considerations would be noted by the investigation team and might influence their assessment of her character and motivations. "Your message will be conveyed to appropriate personnel," Chun said formally. "Take care of yourself, Elena. This situation will be resolved according to proper procedures." After Chun's departure, Elena settled in for what she expected would be a long night of isolation and worry. However, her military training had prepared her for situations where immediate action was impossible and patience was the only viable strategy. She would use the time to systematically analyze every aspect of her predicament, searching for weaknesses in the case against her and opportunities to prove her innocence. The truth was somewhere in the complex web of submarine operations, communication systems, and intelligence activities that surrounded her arrest. She would find that truth, even if it meant challenging every assumption about loyalty, duty, and justice that had guided her naval career. The interrogation room in Naval Intelligence Headquarters felt deliberately oppressive. Its windowless, concrete walls painted in institutional gray that seemed designed to crush hope rather than inspire cooperation. Elena had been sitting in the same metal chair for 4 hours, facing a succession of intelligence officers who repeated the same accusations with methodical persistence. Each interrogator brought a slightly different approach, but their underlying Message remained consistent. She was guilty of treason, and confession was her only path to redemption. Agent Marcus Webb represented the Defense Intelligence Agency, his crisp civilian suit and calculating demeanor marking him as someone accustomed to breaking military officers through psychological pressure rather than military protocol. Webb had arrived with a briefcase full of evidence that painted an increasingly damning picture of Elena's alleged activities, each document more incriminating than the last. "Let's discuss your financial situation, Commander," Webb said, spreading bank statements across the metal table. These records show deposits totaling $47,000 over the past 6 months. Deposits that don't correspond to your Navy salary or any documented income sources. Elena studied the statements with growing alarm. The bank account number was hers, but the deposits were completely unfamiliar. She maintained meticulous financial records as part of her security clearance requirements, and these transactions had never appeared on any statements she had received. "Agent Webb, I've never seen these deposits before. My bank statements show only my Navy salary and occasional income from technical consulting that's fully documented and approved through proper channels." Webb smiled with the practiced confidence of an interrogator who had heard every possible denial. "These are official bank records obtained through federal warrant. Are you suggesting that the banking system has been compromised to frame you?" The question was designed to make Elena's position appear increasingly desperate and irrational. Webb was systematically eliminating every possible explanation except guilt, forcing her to choose between accepting responsibility for crimes she hadn't committed or proposing conspiracy theories that would undermine her credibility. "I'm suggesting that someone with access to sophisticated financial manipulation capabilities has created false records to support false charges. The precision of this operation indicates resources and expertise beyond what individual criminals typically possess." Webb exchanged a meaningful look with Commander Sullivan, who had been observing the interrogation from a corner chair. Their silent communication suggested they had discussed Elena's tendency to claim conspiracy rather than accept responsibility for her actions. "Commander Vasquez," Sullivan interjected, "we found additional evidence that supports the financial irregularities Agent Webb has presented. Your personal computer contained encrypted files with technical specifications for submarine communication systems. Files that shouldn't exist outside of secure military networks." Elena felt her stomach drop as she realized the extent of the evidence being manufactured against her. Someone had not only created false bank records, but had also planted classified files on her personal computer. The level of access required for such operations indicated involvement by personnel with the highest security clearances and detailed knowledge of naval intelligence procedures. "Commander Sullivan, I never downloaded classified files to my personal computer. My security training specifically prohibits such activities, and I've always maintained strict separation between personal and professional digital systems." Webb opened another folder, removing photographs that showed Elena's computer screen displaying what appeared to be classified submarine schematics. The images were taken from an angle that suggested covert surveillance of her home office, though Elena had no memory of accessing such files on her personal system. These photographs were taken by federal agents conducting authorized surveillance of your residence, Webb explained. They clearly show classified material displayed on your personal computer during evening hours, when you weren't conducting official duties. The surveillance photographs were the final piece of an elaborate puzzle designed to destroy her career and reputation. Elena realized that her home had been under observation for weeks or months, with agents documenting activities she couldn't remember or that had been somehow staged without her knowledge. "Agent Webb, I believe these photographs show either digitally manipulated images or activities that occurred without my knowledge or consent. Someone with access to my residence and my computer systems has created false evidence to support false charges." Webb leaned back in his chair, his expression showing the satisfaction of an interrogator who had successfully cornered his target. "Commander, you're asking us to believe that federal agents, banking institutions, and computer forensics experts have all conspired to frame you for crimes you didn't commit. Don't you think that's a rather elaborate explanation for what appears to be straightforward evidence of criminal activity?" Elena understood that Webb was using standard interrogation techniques designed to isolate her from any reasonable defense. By presenting the evidence as coming from multiple independent sources, he was making her claims of innocence appear increasingly paranoid and desperate. "Agent Webb, I understand how the evidence appears, but I also know that I didn't commit the crimes you're describing. If the evidence suggests otherwise, then someone has gone to considerable effort to create that appearance." Sullivan stood and moved to the table, his expression more sympathetic than Webb's but equally determined. "Elena, I've known officers who've made mistakes under pressure. Good people who compromise their principles for financial gain or personal reasons. If you cooperate with this investigation, if you provide information about your contacts and activities, we can work with prosecutors to minimize the consequences." The offer of leniency was designed to encourage confession by suggesting that cooperation would be rewarded with reduced punishment. Elena recognized the technique from her own training in prisoner interrogation, but understanding the psychology didn't make the pressure any less intense. "Commander Sullivan, I appreciate your concern for my welfare, but I can't confess to crimes I didn't commit, and I can't provide information about criminal activities I never engaged in. My cooperation consists of telling the truth about my legitimate activities and challenging false evidence." Webb gathered his documents with deliberate slowness, each movement designed to emphasize the weight of evidence arrayed against her. "Commander Vasquez, you have until tomorrow morning to reconsider your position. After that, we'll be forced to proceed with formal charges and military tribunal proceedings." The threat of military tribunal carried ominous implications for Elena's future. Military courts operated under different rules than civilian courts, with fewer protections for defendants and greater emphasis on national security considerations. A conviction for treason in military court could result in life imprisonment or even execution under extreme circumstances. "I understand the timeline, Agent Webb. I also understand that military tribunals require evidence beyond reasonable doubt. If your case depends on manufactured financial records and planted computer files, you may find that standard more difficult to meet than you anticipate." Webb's expression darkened at Elena's continued defiance. "Commander, you seem remarkably confident for someone facing overwhelming evidence of criminal activity. That confidence suggests either innocence or sophisticated criminal planning. Given the evidence we've presented, innocence seems increasingly unlikely." Elena met Webb's stare directly, drawing on years of submarine command experience, where showing weakness could be fatal. "Agent Webb, my confidence comes from knowing the truth. Truth has a way of surfacing eventually, even when powerful people try to suppress it." After the interrogators left, Elena found herself alone in the gray room with only her thoughts and growing determination. Someone had orchestrated an elaborate frame job designed to destroy her life and career, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated her knowledge of submarine operations and the loyalty of the crew she had worked with. Over 18 years of service, the submarine communication systems she had installed weren't just technical equipment. They were lifelines, connecting crews who trusted each other with their lives. If those systems were truly compromised, the submarine commanders would have noticed performance anomalies or security irregularities. Their silence suggested either that the systems were functioning normally or that they were being prevented from reporting problems through official channels. Elena began to consider the possibility that her frame-up was connected to something larger than simple financial corruption. Someone wanted her discredited and removed from any position where she could influence submarine operations or investigate security irregularities. The question was what they were trying to hide and how her knowledge or position threatened their activities. The Submarine Communication Project had given her unprecedented access to the Pacific Fleet's most sensitive operations. She had worked aboard 12 different submarines, observed their operational procedures, and gained the trust of their crews. If someone was conducting unauthorized activities involving those submarines, her knowledge and relationships would represent a significant threat to their security. Elena realized that her situation might be even more dangerous than treason charges suggested. If powerful individuals were willing to fabricate evidence and destroy her career to prevent her from exposing their activities, they might also be willing to arrange more permanent solutions to eliminate her as a threat. The thought of assassination attempt seemed paranoid, but Elena's submarine training had taught her to consider worst-case scenarios and prepare accordingly. Someone with the resources to manipulate banking records and plant classified files on her computer certainly had the capability to arrange accidents or suicides that would eliminate inconvenient witnesses. Elena's growing understanding of her predicament was interrupted by the sound of unusual activity in the corridor outside the interrogation room. Multiple sets of footsteps moved with urgent purpose, accompanied by radio chatter that suggested some kind of operational emergency was developing. Commander Sullivan appeared in the doorway, his expression showing a mixture of confusion and concern that hadn't been present during the interrogation. "Commander Vasquez, there's been a development in your case. You need to come with me immediately." Elena followed Sullivan through corridors filled with personnel moving with crisis-level urgency. The base's communication center was bustling with activity that reminded her of wartime operations, with officers coordinating multiple simultaneous activities while maintaining constant radio contact with off-site locations. "Commander Sullivan, what kind of development requires this level of response?" Sullivan paused at the entrance to the communication center, his expression showing genuine bewilderment. "Elena, 12 submarines have simultaneously surfaced in international waters and begun broadcasting on emergency frequencies. They're requesting immediate communication with you and refusing to respond to standard command directives." Elena felt her world shift as she realized that the submarine crews she had worked with were taking unprecedented action to support her. 12 submarines surfacing simultaneously and refusing orders represented the largest act of military insubordination in naval history. The crews were risking their careers and potentially their lives to demonstrate their faith in her innocence. "Commander Sullivan, those crews know me personally. They know my character and my commitment to the Navy. If they're taking this kind of risk, it's because they have information or concerns that aren't being addressed through official channels." Sullivan led her into the communication center, where Admiral Morrison stood surrounded by staff officers trying to manage an unprecedented crisis. Multiple screens showed the positions of surfaced submarines scattered across the Pacific, each one maintaining radio silence except for their demands to communicate with Elena. Morrison looked up as Elena entered, his expression showing the strain of a commander facing a situation without precedent in naval history. "Elena, I need you to help me understand what's happening here. 12 submarine crews are refusing direct orders from the Chief of Naval Operations. They say they won't respond to any communications until they can speak with you directly." Elena studied the tactical display showing the submarine positions, recognizing the strategic implications of their coordinated action. The crews had surfaced in positions that maximized their visibility to international monitoring systems while maintaining defensive formations that would make it difficult for other naval forces to approach them safely. "Admiral Morrison, those crews installed the communication systems I designed. If they're using those systems to coordinate this action, it suggests they have concerns about the security of standard naval communication channels. They may have information about the real source of the intelligence leaks that led to my arrest. Morrison's expression showed growing realization that Elena's case might be more complex than the evidence suggested. Elena, if you're innocent, if this whole investigation is based on false evidence, then we have a bigger problem than one officer's career. We have a security breach that reaches into the highest levels of naval command. Elena nodded, understanding that her personal vindication was now secondary to a larger crisis threatening the integrity of the entire submarine force. Admiral, I request permission to communicate with those submarine crews. I believe they have information that will expose the real source of the security breaches and identify the people responsible for framing me. Morrison looked around the communication center at staff officers who were struggling to manage an unprecedented crisis. 12 submarines remaining surfaced and unresponsive represented a massive vulnerability that could be exploited by hostile forces. The situation required resolution within hours rather than days. Elena, I'm going to give you that communication. But I want you to understand that everything you say will be recorded and analyzed. If you're part of some larger conspiracy, this communication will provide evidence for your prosecution. Elena moved to the communication station, her hand steady despite the magnitude of the moment. 18 years of submarine service had prepared her for situations where lives depended on clear thinking and decisive action. Now those same skills would determine whether truth or deception prevailed in the most important conversation of her naval career. The communication channel crackled to life as Elena adjusted the microphone, her voice carrying across thousands of miles of ocean to reach the 12 submarine crews who had risked everything to support her. The communication center fell silent as naval officers and intelligence personnel gathered to witness what could either be a confession or the beginning of an unprecedented revelation. This is Commander Elena Vasquez to all stations. I'm speaking from Naval Base Coronado under official supervision. Please identify your lead vessel and state your concerns. The response came immediately, the voice familiar and steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. Commander Vasquez, this is Captain Michael Torres aboard USS Leviathan. We're speaking for all 12 boats currently surfaced in international waters. Ma'am, we have critical information regarding the security breaches that led to your arrest. Elena recognized Torres immediately. She had worked closely with him during the communication system installation aboard his submarine 6 months earlier. He was a methodical officer with 15 years of submarine experience, not someone given to dramatic gestures or insubordination without compelling reasons. Captain Torres, please provide your information through proper channels. Admiral Morrison and intelligence personnel are monitoring this communication. Ma'am, that's exactly the problem. The proper channels have been compromised. We've been monitoring unusual communication traffic for the past 3 weeks, and we've identified the source of the intelligence leaks that someone is trying to pin on you. Admiral Morrison stepped closer to the communication station, his expression showing intense interest in Torres's allegations. The suggestion that standard communication channels were compromised carried enormous implications for ongoing naval operations and national security. Captain Torres, this is Admiral Morrison. You and your crews are in violation of direct orders from the highest levels of naval command. Explain your actions and provide immediate compliance with standing directives. Torres's voice remained respectful but firm when he responded. Sir, with respect, we believe those orders may be coming from personnel involved in the actual security breaches. We've documented evidence that someone within Naval Command has been intercepting and redirecting classified communications. Commander Sullivan moved to a secondary communication station, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he accessed classified databases. Elena could see him cross-referencing the submarine positions with recent operational orders, searching for patterns that might support or contradict Torres's claims. Captain Torres, Elena said, what specific evidence do you have regarding communication intercepts? Ma'am, during routine system maintenance 3 days ago, we discovered unauthorized monitoring devices attached to our primary communication arrays. These devices were sophisticated enough to record and transmit all of our communications without triggering security alerts. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Elena felt a surge of vindication mixed with alarm. The discovery of unauthorized monitoring equipment confirmed her suspicions that the intelligence leaks were coming from someone with physical access to naval systems, rather than from her legitimate project activities. Captain Torres, did you find similar devices on other submarines? Affirmative, ma'am. All 12 boats equipped with your communication systems had identical monitoring devices. The installation was professional, suggesting someone with detailed technical knowledge and authorized access to our vessels. Agent Webb, who had been observing the communication in hostile silence, stepped forward with obvious skepticism. Captain Torres, how do we know you didn't install these devices yourself as part of Commander Vasquez's intelligence operation? Torres's response carried the controlled anger of a submarine commander whose integrity was being questioned. Agent Webb, these devices were installed after Commander Vasquez completed her work on our boats. The technical specifications don't match any equipment she provided, and the installation methods show different expertise. Elena realized that the submarine crews had been conducting their own investigation parallel to the official inquiry into her activities. Their findings supported her claims of innocence while pointing toward a more sophisticated conspiracy involving multiple naval installations. Captain Torres, have you been able to trace the signals from these monitoring devices? Ma'am, that's where this gets interesting. The devices were transmitting to a collection point aboard USS Constellation, a command vessel that's been coordinating intelligence operations throughout the Pacific. The communications were then being forwarded to external recipients using encrypted channels. Admiral Morrison's expression darkened as he recognized the implications of Torres's revelation. USS Constellation was flagship for Admiral Richard Hawthorne, Morrison's immediate superior and one of the most senior officers in the Pacific Fleet. If Torres was correct, the intelligence leaks were originating from the highest levels of naval command. Captain Torres, you're making serious accusations against senior naval personnel. Do you have concrete evidence to support these claims? Sir, we've recorded the signal intercepts and documented the transmission patterns. We also have photographic evidence of the unauthorized devices and technical analysis showing they weren't part of Commander Vasquez's original installation. Elena understood why the submarine crews had chosen such dramatic action to present their evidence. If Admiral Hawthorne was involved in the intelligence leaks, any attempt to report their findings through standard channels would have been suppressed or manipulated to protect the conspiracy. Admiral Morrison, Elena said. This explains why I was targeted for framing. Someone needed a scapegoat to explain the intelligence leaks when they were discovered. My position as communication system coordinator made me the perfect candidate. Morrison nodded grimly, his expression showing the weight of command decisions that could affect the entire Pacific Fleet. Elena, if Captain Torres is correct, then we're dealing with a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of naval command, but we need more than allegations to proceed against officers of Admiral Hawthorne's rank. Commander Sullivan looked up from his computer terminal, his face pale with the implications of what he had discovered. Admiral Morrison, I've been analyzing the operational orders sent to these submarines over the past month. Several directives came directly from Admiral Hawthorne's staff that would have positioned these boats for optimal intelligence collection. Elena felt the pieces of the conspiracy falling into place as she realized the full scope of the operation. Admiral Hawthorne has been using the submarine fleet as an intelligence collection platform, positioning boats to intercept foreign communications, while making it appear they were conducting routine training exercises. Captain Torres, have you observed any correlation between your operational orders and foreign naval activities in your patrol areas? Ma'am, that's affirmative. On 3 separate occasions, we were ordered to specific positions that coincidentally provided optimal surveillance of Chinese naval exercises. The timing was too precise to be accidental. Agent Webb, who had been growing increasingly agitated during the communication, stepped forward with obvious hostility. This is all very convenient, Commander Vasquez. Your submarine friends surface simultaneously to provide exactly the evidence you need to escape treason charges. How do we know this isn't a coordinated deception? Torres's voice cut through Webb's skepticism with the authority of a combat veteran. Agent Webb, 12 submarine crews don't risk court-martial to protect a traitor. We're risking our careers because we know Commander Vasquez's character, and we have evidence that someone else is responsible for the security breaches. Elena realized that Webb's continued hostility, despite the mounting evidence, suggested he might be more than just an overzealous investigator. His determination to maintain her guilt in the face of contradictory evidence indicated possible involvement in the conspiracy or pressure from higher authorities to ensure her conviction. Agent Webb, the evidence Captain Torres has presented should be sufficient to suspend the charges against me pending a full investigation into Admiral Hawthorne's activities. Webb's expression showed desperation rather than professional disappointment. Commander Vasquez, you're asking us to believe that a decorated admiral with 30 years of service would betray his country for financial gain. That accusation requires extraordinary evidence. Captain Torres's voice carried across the communication channel with renewed determination. Agent Webb, we have that evidence. We've been recording and analyzing communications from USS Constellation for the past week. Admiral Hawthorne has been coordinating intelligence sales to foreign governments using naval assets under his command. Admiral Morrison stepped closer to the communication station, his voice carrying the authority of someone making command decisions under extreme pressure. Captain Torres, I'm ordering you to transmit all evidence to this facility immediately. This investigation is now being conducted at the highest levels of Naval Command. Sir, we've prepared comprehensive documentation packages for transmission, but we request assurance that this evidence won't be suppressed or manipulated by personnel potentially involved in the conspiracy. Morrison looked around the communication center at the personnel who had gathered to monitor the unprecedented situation. Elena could see him evaluating which staff members could be trusted with information that could expose corruption at the highest levels of Naval Command. Captain Torres, I'm personally guaranteeing the security of your evidence. Begin transmission immediately. As data began flowing from the 12 submarines to the base communication center, Elena realized that her personal vindication was becoming secondary to exposing the conspiracy that threatened the security of the entire Pacific Fleet. The submarine crews had risked everything to ensure that the truth emerged, and their courage was about to expose betrayal at the highest levels of Naval Command. The communication screens filled with technical data, intercepted conversations, and photographic evidence that painted a picture of systematic intelligence selling that had been ongoing for months or possibly years. Elena watched Admiral Morrison's expression grow increasingly grim as he reviewed evidence that would destroy careers and potentially compromise ongoing military operations. Webb stood behind the group of officers reviewing the incoming evidence, his expression showing barely controlled panic rather than professional concern. Elena realized that his behavior throughout the investigation had been designed to ensure her conviction regardless of the evidence, suggesting he was either part of the conspiracy or under pressure from those who were. Admiral Morrison, Elena said quietly, I believe Agent Webb's investigation was designed to ensure my conviction rather than discover the truth. His continued insistence on my guilt, despite mounting evidence, suggests he may be compromised. Morrison nodded grimly. his expression showing the weight of command decisions that would reshape the Pacific Fleet's leadership structure. The evidence streaming in from 12 submarines was about to expose corruption that reached into the highest levels of naval command, and Elena's courage in challenging false charges had been the catalyst for revealing the truth. The evidence. Transmission from the 12 submarines continued for over an hour, filling the communication center's servers with intercepted conversations, technical schematics, and financial records that painted a devastating picture of corruption within the Pacific Fleet's command structure. Elena watched Admiral Morrison's face grow, increasingly pale as he reviewed documentation that would fundamentally alter the Navy's understanding of recent intelligence failures. Lieutenant Commander Chun worked frantically at a computer terminal, organizing the incoming data into coherent categories that would support formal legal proceedings. Her expertise in naval communications proved invaluable as she identified patterns in the intercepted messages that revealed the scope and sophistication of Admiral Hawthorne's intelligence operation. Admiral Morrison, Chun reported, the submarines have documented over 40 instances of unauthorized intelligence collection coordinated directly from USS Constellation. The targets included allied naval exercises, diplomatic communications, and classified research facilities. Elena studied the technical specifications of the monitoring devices that had been discovered aboard the submarines, recognizing sophisticated equipment that exceeded anything available through standard naval procurement channels. The devices represented military-grade surveillance, technology that would have required significant financial resources and specialized technical expertise to acquire and install. Admiral Morrison, these monitoring devices were manufactured by classified defense contractors whose products are typically available only to intelligence agencies. Someone with extraordinary access and funding coordinated their procurement and installation. Agent Webb moved away from the group, reviewing evidence, his behavior becoming increasingly agitated as the documentation undermined every aspect of the case against Elena. His sudden interest in leaving the communication center suggested either panic or an urgent need to contact external allies who might be compromised by the revelations. Agent Webb, Admiral Morrison called sharply, "I need you to remain available for additional questioning. The evidence we're reviewing may require clarification of your investigation methods and conclusions." Webb froze at the doorway, his expression showing the desperation of someone whose carefully constructed plans were collapsing in real time. Admiral Morrison, I believe this evidence may be fabricated by personnel involved in a conspiracy to protect Commander Vasquez. The timing and coordination of these revelations suggests sophisticated deception rather than legitimate intelligence. Elena recognized Webb's continued insistence on her guilt as evidence of his involvement in the conspiracy. His determination to discredit legitimate evidence while maintaining obviously false charges indicated pressure from sources beyond normal investigative authority. Agent Webb, the evidence includes technical documentation that would be impossible to fabricate. Without access to classified manufacturing specifications and installation procedures, the submarine crews have provided photographic and electronic proof of unauthorized monitoring that supports their allegations. Commander Sullivan, who had been analyzing financial records transmitted from the submarines, looked up from his computer terminal with obvious shock. Admiral Morrison, the financial analysis shows payments totaling over $12 million, transferred from foreign intelligence services to accounts linked to Admiral Hawthorne's operation. The magnitude of the financial corruption represented by Sullivan's discovery explained the sophisticated nature of the conspiracy against Elena. $12 million provided sufficient resources to purchase advanced surveillance equipment, manipulate banking records, and coordinate false evidence against innocent personnel. Elena realized that her framing had been part of a larger operation designed to protect a multi-million-dollar intelligence selling scheme that had been ongoing for years. Admiral Hawthorne's position provided access to the most sensitive naval operations, making his intelligence extremely valuable to foreign governments. Admiral Morrison, the financial evidence explains how someone could afford to manipulate banking records and plant false evidence in my personal computer. Admiral Hawthorne's operation generated sufficient revenue to purchase sophisticated technical capabilities. Morrison nodded grimly as he recognized the implications of the evidence streaming in from the submarine fleet. Elena, it appears you were targeted because your communication project gave you access to systems that could expose Admiral Hawthorne's monitoring devices. Your technical expertise represented a threat to his operation. Captain Torres's voice crackled over the communication channel as he provided additional context for the evidence his crews had gathered. Admiral Morrison, we believe Commander Vasquez was specifically chosen as a scapegoat because her legitimate access to submarine systems would make intelligence leaks appear to originate from her project activities. Elena understood that Admiral Hawthorne's conspiracy had required someone with comprehensive knowledge of submarine communications to serve as a credible scapegoat when the intelligence leaks were eventually discovered. Her position as project coordinator had made her the perfect candidate for framing. Captain Torres, how long have you suspected that your communications were being monitored? Ma'am, we noticed unusual performance anomalies in our communication systems about 3 weeks ago. Initially, we assumed the problems were related to your new installations, but technical analysis showed the anomalies were caused by external monitoring rather than system malfunctions. Elena felt vindicated by Torres's explanation, knowing that her technical work was being blamed for problems actually caused by Admiral Hawthorne's unauthorized surveillance equipment. The submarine crew's loyalty and investigative efforts had prevented her from being permanently destroyed by false accusations. Admiral Morrison turned to address the entire communication center, his voice carrying the authority of a commander, making decisions that would reshape the Pacific Fleet's leadership structure. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence we've received indicates systematic corruption at the highest levels of naval command. This investigation is now classified at the highest security levels. Elena realized that her personal vindication was becoming part of a larger counterintelligence operation that would expose decades of betrayal and require fundamental changes in naval security procedures. The courage of 12 submarine crews had prevented a massive intelligence operation from continuing undetected. Agent Webb made another attempt to leave the communication center, but security personnel stationed themselves at all exits on Morrison's orders. The systematic containment of all personnel suggested that Morrison was treating the situation as an active counterintelligence emergency requiring immediate damage control. Agent Webb, Morrison said formally, you're confined to this facility pending a complete review of your investigation methods and potential connections to the intelligence operation we've discovered. Webb's face showed the desperation of someone whose careful plans had been destroyed by unexpected resistance from victims who refused to accept false accusations. His involvement in the conspiracy was becoming increasingly obvious as legitimate evidence contradicted every aspect of his case against Elena. Elena watched the systematic exposure of the conspiracy with a mixture of relief and determination. Her personal vindication was important, but the larger implications for naval security required continued vigilance and courage from officers willing to challenge corruption regardless of personal cost. The communication screens continued displaying evidence that would destroy careers, expose foreign intelligence operations, and fundamentally change how the Navy approached internal security. Elena realized that her refusal to accept false charges had catalyzed the exposure of betrayal that threatened the entire Pacific Fleet. Captain Torres's voice provided a final update on the submarine fleet status. Admiral Morrison, all 12 boats are prepared to remain surfaced and maintain communication until this investigation is complete. We're committed to ensuring that the truth emerges and that responsible personnel are held accountable." Morrison acknowledged Torres's commitment, while recognizing the enormous risk the submarine crews were taking by maintaining their unprecedented action. Their willingness to sacrifice their careers to expose corruption represented the best traditions of naval service and personal integrity. Elena understood that the next phase of the investigation would require systematic dismantling of Admiral Hawthorne's intelligence operation while protecting ongoing naval operations from further compromise. The evidence provided by the submarine crews would support legal proceedings that could reshape the Pacific Fleet's entire command structure. The weight of the moment settled over the communication center as personnel realized they were witnessing the exposure of one of the largest intelligence scandals in naval history. Elena's courage in challenging false charges had prevented a massive security breach from continuing undetected, potentially saving countless lives and protecting national security interests. Admiral Morrison's secure communication line buzzed with an incoming priority message from the Pentagon, indicating that news of the submarine crisis had reached the highest levels of military command. Elena watched as Morrison's expression shifted from concern to alarm, while he reviewed what appeared to be direct orders from the Chief of Naval Operations. "Elena," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a man receiving orders. "He didn't want to follow. I've been directed to transfer custody of you and this investigation to Admiral Hawthorne's command. Apparently, the situation with the submarines requires his personal intervention." Elena felt a chill of recognition as she realized that Admiral Hawthorne was attempting to regain control of the investigation through official channels. His position within the naval hierarchy gave him authority to override Morrison's decisions and potentially suppress the evidence that exposed his intelligence operation. "Admiral Morrison, transferring me to Admiral Hawthorne's custody would be like delivering evidence directly to the person responsible for the conspiracy. He'll use his authority to ensure that the truth never emerges." Commander Sullivan looked up from his analysis of the financial records, his expression showing urgent concern. "Admiral Morrison, the payment patterns we've identified indicate that Admiral Hawthorne's operation has been active for over 3 years. Transferring control of this investigation to his command would compromise everything we've discovered." Morrison studied the orders on his screen with obvious reluctance, understanding that defying direct commands from the Pentagon could end his career while potentially saving Elena's life. The moral complexity of the situation required him to choose between personal loyalty to the chain of command and broader loyalty to naval integrity. "Elena, I'm being ordered to turn you over to Admiral Hawthorne's security team within the next 2 hours. The official justification is that your case involves potential compromise of his command's intelligence operations." Elena realized that Admiral Hawthorne was using his legitimate authority to eliminate the primary witness against his conspiracy. Once she was under his control, he could arrange for her to disappear or be silenced permanently through methods that would appear to be standard security procedures. Agent Webb, who had been unusually quiet since the submarine evidence began arriving, suddenly showed renewed confidence as he realized that his superiors were regaining control of the situation. "Admiral Morrison, this investigation has been compromised by Commander Vasquez's associates. Admiral Hawthorne's intervention will restore proper security protocols." Elena understood that Webb's sudden optimism confirmed his connection to Admiral Hawthorne's conspiracy. His relief at the prospect of transferring custody suggested that he had been coordinating with external authorities throughout the investigation. "Admiral Morrison, Agent Webb's behavior throughout this investigation has been designed to ensure my conviction regardless of evidence. His eagerness to transfer me to Admiral Hawthorne's custody confirms his involvement in the conspiracy." Captain Torres's voice crackled over the communication channel as he monitored the developing situation from his position in international waters. Admiral Morrison, if Commander Vasquez is transferred to Admiral Hawthorne's command, we believe she'll be eliminated to prevent further exposure of the intelligence operation. Morrison recognized the unprecedented nature of the situation he was facing. 12 submarine commanders were defying direct orders while presenting evidence that implicated his immediate superior in systematic betrayal. His decisions over the next few hours would determine whether truth or corruption prevailed. Captain Torres, I understand your concerns about Commander Vasquez's safety. However, I'm receiving direct orders from the highest levels of Naval Command. My authority to protect her is being superseded by superior directives. Elena realized that Morrison was being placed in an impossible position, where following orders would facilitate her elimination while defying orders would destroy his career and potentially compromise his ability to protect other personnel. The systematic pressure being applied suggested that Admiral Hawthorne's conspiracy included personnel at the Pentagon level. Lieutenant Commander Chun, who had been monitoring communication traffic throughout the crisis, suddenly looked up from her station with obvious alarm. Admiral Morrison, I'm detecting unusual movement by naval security forces. Multiple units are being deployed toward this facility, with orders to secure all personnel involved in this investigation. Elena understood that Admiral Hawthorne was moving to contain the situation through overwhelming force rather than legal procedures. The deployment of security forces suggested that he was prepared to classify the entire investigation to prevent public exposure of his intelligence operation. Admiral Morrison, Admiral Hawthorne is treating this as a counterintelligence emergency to justify extraordinary measures. Once his security forces arrive, everyone involved in exposing his conspiracy will be detained indefinitely. Morrison looked around the communication center at personnel who had risked their careers to support the investigation into Elena's case. Their dedication to discovering the truth had exposed corruption that threatened the entire Pacific Fleet. But their courage was about to be neutralized by superior force. Elena, I believe Captain Torres and his submarine crews represent your best hope for survival. If you remain on this base, you'll be eliminated to protect Admiral Hawthorne's operation. But if you can reach international waters, you might have a chance to expose the truth through alternative channels. Elena realized that Morrison was suggesting an escape plan that would require her to abandon her naval career while potentially saving her life. The choice between personal safety and professional loyalty represented the most difficult decision she had ever faced. Commander Sullivan moved to a secure communication terminal, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he accessed classified databases. Admiral Morrison, I'm copying all evidence related to this investigation to secure external servers. If Admiral Hawthorne's forces seize our systems, at least some documentation will survive. Elena understood that Sullivan was preparing for the worst-case scenario where everyone involved in the investigation would be detained or eliminated. His efforts to preserve evidence represented a final attempt to ensure that the truth would eventually emerge, even if they were silenced. Agent Webb moved toward the communication center's main console, apparently attempting to disable the systems transmitting evidence to external locations. His sudden technical activity suggested coordination with incoming security forces who wanted to prevent further information from leaving the facility. Agent Webb, Morrison said sharply, step away from that console immediately. Any attempt to interfere with ongoing communications will be considered obstruction of a federal investigation. Webb's expression showed the desperation of someone whose cover had been completely exposed. Admiral Morrison, you're interfering with a classified counterintelligence operation. Admiral Hawthorne's authority supersedes your jurisdiction in Admiral Hawthorne's Azuka Culta. Matters of national security. Elena realized that Webb was revealing the extent of Admiral Hawthorne's influence within the intelligence community. His confidence in superseding Morrison's authority suggested that the conspiracy included personnel throughout the military and civilian intelligence apparatus. Captain Torres's voice provided an urgent update from the submarine fleet. Admiral Morrison, we're detecting rapid movement by surface vessels toward our positions. It appears that Admiral Hawthorne is preparing to force our submarines to submerge through overwhelming military pressure. Morrison understood that the entire situation was escalating toward a confrontation that could result in armed conflict between different elements of the U.S. Navy. Admiral Hawthorne's willingness to use force against loyal submarine crews demonstrated the extent of his desperation to protect his intelligence operation. Captain Torres, maintain your positions, but prepare for defensive action if threatened. Do not initiate hostilities, but protect yourselves if fired upon. Elena watched the systematic preparation for what could become the first armed conflict within the U.S. Navy since the Civil War. Admiral Hawthorne's conspiracy had reached the point where he was prepared to use military force against loyal personnel to protect his criminal activities. The communication center's external security systems activated as Admiral Morrison prepared for the arrival of hostile forces. Elena realized that her decision to challenge false charges had escalated into a crisis that would determine whether corruption or integrity would control the Pacific Fleet. The weight of responsibility for the submarine crews who had risked everything to support her pressed heavily on Elena's shoulders. Their courage in exposing the truth had placed them in mortal danger from the very institution they had sworn to serve. Morrison looked directly at Elena with an expression that conveyed both respect and regret. Elena, in 5 minutes, I'm going to create a distraction that will allow you to reach the harbor. Captain Torres is prepared to extract you to international waters where you'll be beyond Admiral Hawthorne's immediate reach. Elena understood that Morrison was offering her a chance to escape while sacrificing his own career to protect her. His willingness to defy direct orders from the Pentagon demonstrated the same courage that had motivated the submarine crews to surface in her defense. The harbor erupted in chaos as Elena sprinted across the darkened pier toward the waiting submarine rescue craft, her naval training guiding her through shadows while security searchlights swept the water behind her. Admiral Morrison's distraction had worked perfectly, drawing Admiral Hawthorne's security forces toward a fabricated emergency on the opposite side of the base while she made her desperate escape toward international waters. Commander Rodriguez waited at the controls of a high-speed rescue vessel, his weathered face showing the tension of a man knowingly committing career suicide to protect a fellow officer. The boat's engines were already running, its navigation lights dark to avoid detection by the increasing number of surface vessels converging on the harbor. Commander Vasquez, we have maybe 10 minutes before they realize Morrison's emergency. Was a diversion, Rodriguez said as Elena leaped aboard the rescue craft. Captain Torres has positioned USS Leviathan 12 miles offshore, but we need to reach international waters before Admiral Hawthorne's forces can intercept us. Elena looked back at the naval base that had been her home for 3 years, watching security vehicles race between buildings while searchlights continued their futile sweep of empty areas. Morrison's sacrifice was buying them precious time, but she knew his career was over regardless of whether her escape succeeded. The rescue craft accelerated toward open ocean, its powerful engines driving them through increasingly rough seas as they moved away from the protected harbor. Elena could see the lights of pursuing vessels beginning to organize behind them, their formation suggesting coordination from Admiral Hawthorne's command center aboard USS Constellation. Rodriguez, how many boats do they have in pursuit? At least 6 fast attack craft, plus 2 destroyers moving to block our route to international waters. Admiral Hawthorne is throwing everything he has at preventing your escape. Elena realized that Admiral Hawthorne's desperate response confirmed the magnitude of what the submarine crews had exposed. His willingness to deploy multiple naval vessels against a single rescue craft demonstrated that her testimony represented an existential threat to his entire operation. The radio crackled with communications from the pursuing vessels, their commanders demanding that Rodriguez stop his boat and return to base immediately. The official language carried the authority of legitimate naval orders, but Elena recognized the desperation beneath the formal protocols. "This is Admiral Hawthorne aboard USS Constellation," came the familiar voice that had once represented the pinnacle of naval authority to Elena. "Commander Rodriguez, you are in violation of direct orders and harboring a fugitive suspected of treason. Return to base immediately or face the consequences of mutiny." Rodriguez looked at Elena with grim determination, his hand steady on the throttles despite the enormous pressure being applied through official channels. "Commander Vasquez, Admiral Hawthorne is offering amnesty if we turn back now. He's also threatening to classify this as an act of terrorism if we continue toward international waters." Elena understood that Admiral Hawthorne was using both incentives and threats to prevent her from reaching the safety of Captain Torres's submarine fleet. His desperation was evident in his willingness to escalate the situation to the level of terrorism charges, which would justify extreme measures against all personnel involved in her escape. Rodriguez, Admiral Hawthorne, has already demonstrated his willingness to frame innocent people for treason. His promises of amnesty are worthless, and his threats confirm that we're over the target. The lights of USS Leviathan appeared on the horizon, the submarine's distinctive silhouette providing a beacon of hope in the increasingly dangerous situation. Elena could see other submarine shapes surrounding Torres's vessel, the 12 boats maintaining a defensive formation that would make it difficult for Admiral Hawthorne's forces to approach safely. "Captain." Torres's voice came over the rescue craft's radio, his calm professionalism providing stark contrast to the chaos erupting across the Pacific Fleet. "Commander Vasquez, we have international media representatives aboard several of our submarines. Admiral Hawthorne's actions are being broadcast live to news organizations worldwide." Elena realized that the submarine crews had made the brilliant tactical decision to invite international observers, transforming their military rebellion into a public relations crisis that Admiral Hawthorne couldn't suppress through classification or force. The presence of civilian journalists meant that any violence against the submarine fleet would be witnessed by the entire world. Admiral Hawthorne's response came immediately over the radio frequencies, his voice showing the strain of a man watching his carefully constructed conspiracy collapse in real time. "Captain Torres, you are harboring international media representatives without authorization. This constitutes a security breach of the highest order." Torres's reply carried the confidence of a submarine commander who had calculated all possible responses to his unprecedented action. "Admiral Hawthorne, these journalists are here to document evidence of systematic corruption within the Pacific Fleet. Their presence ensures that any attempt to suppress this information will be unsuccessful." Elena watched the pursuing vessels slow their approach as they recognized the implications of international media coverage. Admiral Hawthorne's forces were now operating under global scrutiny, making it impossible for them to use the extreme measures that might have been employed in secret. The rescue craft reached the perimeter of the submarine formation, where Elena could see news helicopters circling at safe distances while maintaining constant video coverage of the unprecedented confrontation. The submarine crews had transformed her personal struggle for vindication into a public exposure of military corruption. USS Leviathan's deck crew helped Elena transfer from the rescue craft to the submarine, their efficiency demonstrating the careful planning that had gone into her extraction. Captain Torres waited at the conning tower, his expression showing both relief at her successful escape and determination to complete their mission. "Commander Vasquez, welcome aboard. We've prepared a comprehensive briefing for the international media representatives who are documenting the situation. Your testimony will be broadcast worldwide within the next hour." Elena realized that her ordeal was transitioning from a desperate escape to a public revelation that would expose Admiral Hawthorne's conspiracy to global scrutiny. The courage of 12 submarine crews had created an opportunity for truth to triumph over corruption through the power of international attention. Admiral Hawthorne's forces maintained their positions around the submarine formation, but their ability to use force had been neutralized by the presence of international observers. Elena could see the frustration in their formation patterns. As they realized that their quarry was now beyond their reach, the media representatives gathered in USS Leviathan's crew quarters, their equipment recording every detail of Elena's testimony about the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed her career and life. Their questions were professional and thorough, designed to extract information that would support comprehensive news coverage. "Commander Vasquez," asked Sarah Mitchell from CNN, "can you explain how Admiral Hawthorne's intelligence operation worked and why you were chosen as a scapegoat?" Elena took a deep breath, understanding that her next words would expose decades of betrayal while potentially saving countless lives. Admiral Hawthorne used his position to coordinate systematic intelligence sales to foreign governments, generating millions of dollars in revenue while compromising American naval operations worldwide. The weight of her accusations settled over the submarine's crew quarters as international journalists recorded testimony that would reshape public understanding of military corruption. Elena realized that her personal vindication was becoming part of a larger expose that would demand fundamental changes in naval security procedures. Captain Torres provided technical documentation to support Elena's testimony, his evidence demonstrating the sophisticated nature of Admiral Hawthorne's surveillance operations. The combination of Elena's insider knowledge and the submarine crew's investigative work created an overwhelming case against the conspiracy. Admiral Hawthorne's voice crackled over the radio frequencies one final time, his desperation now obvious to everyone monitoring the communications. "This is a classified military operation. All media representatives are ordered to cease recording and delete any materials related to ongoing naval activities." Sarah Mitchell looked directly into her camera while responding to Admiral Hawthorne's demands. "This is Sarah Mitchell reporting live from international waters where U.S. Navy personnel are exposing systematic corruption within the Pacific Fleet." Admiral Hawthorne's attempts to suppress this information only confirmed the validity of the allegations being presented. Elena watched Admiral Hawthorne's carefully constructed conspiracy crumble under the weight of international scrutiny and media coverage. The submarine crew's courage in risking their careers had created an opportunity for truth to emerge despite the enormous power arrayed against it. The confrontation that had begun with false charges against a single naval officer had evolved into a global expose of military corruption that would demand accountability at the highest levels of government. Elena's refusal to accept injustice had catalyzed a transformation that would reshape the Pacific Fleet and restore integrity to naval operations. The congressional hearing room buzzed with unprecedented activity as representatives, senators, and media personnel gathered to witness what had already been dubbed the Submarine 12 crisis in international headlines. Elena sat at the witness table, her dress uniform bearing the ribbons and decorations of 18 years of exemplary naval service, facing a panel of lawmakers who would determine the future of Pacific Fleet operations. Chairman Patricia Williamson, a former Navy JAG officer turned congresswoman, called the emergency session to order with the gravity befitting a scandal that had captured global attention. The evidence presented by the 12 submarine crews had already triggered FBI raids on Admiral Hawthorne's personal and professional assets, uncovering a conspiracy that reached far beyond simple intelligence sales. "Commander Vasquez, Chairman," Williamson began, "your courage in challenging false charges has exposed systematic corruption that threatened the security of our submarine fleet. Please provide this committee with your assessment of how Admiral Hawthorne's operation functioned and why it remained undetected for so long." Elena looked across the packed hearing room, recognizing faces from news broadcasts that had covered her story for the past 2 weeks. Captain Torres and several of his fellow submarine commanders sat in the gallery, their presence a reminder of the extraordinary risks they had taken to ensure the truth emerged. Chairman Williamson, Admiral Hawthorne, exploited his legitimate authority to position submarines for intelligence collection while installing unauthorized monitoring equipment to intercept and sell classified communications. His position within the naval hierarchy provided perfect cover for activities that appeared to be routine operational planning. Representative Marcus Johnson from the House Armed Services Committee leaned forward with obvious concern. "Commander, how was Admiral Hawthorne able to coordinate financial transactions totaling over $12 million without triggering oversight mechanisms?" "Sir, the investigation revealed that Admiral Hawthorne had established shell companies that received payments disguised as consulting fees for legitimate defense contractors. The money was laundered through multiple accounts before being distributed to personnel involved in the conspiracy." Elena watched Agent Webb enter the hearing room in handcuffs, his arrest having occurred during FBI raids that had swept up dozens of personnel connected to Admiral Hawthorne's operation. His presence as a defendant, rather than an investigator, provided stark evidence of how deeply the conspiracy had penetrated federal law enforcement agencies. Chairman Williamson addressed the broader implications of the scandal that had rocked the military establishment. "Commander Vasquez, what systematic changes do you recommend to prevent similar conspiracies from developing within our naval forces?" "Ma'am, I recommend mandatory rotation of senior officers to prevent the development of personal networks that can facilitate corruption. I also recommend independent oversight of all intelligence operations and regular technical audits of communication systems to detect unauthorized modifications." Elena's recommendations were based on extensive discussions with the submarine crews who had exposed the conspiracy, their collective experience providing insights into vulnerabilities that had been exploited by Admiral Hawthorne's operation. The reforms they proposed would fundamentally alter how the Navy approached internal security. Senator Robert Chun from the Senate Intelligence Committee raised concerns about the international implications of the scandal. "Commander, foreign governments purchased classified information from Admiral Hawthorne for over 3 years. How do we assess the damage to our national security?" Senator Chun, the submarine crew's investigation documented specific intelligence that was compromised, including operational plans for joint exercises with allied forces and technical specifications for submarine communication systems. "The damage assessment is ongoing, but the impact on our strategic capabilities has been significant." Elena realized that her testimony was helping lawmakers understand the full scope of a betrayal that had compromised American interests while enriching a small group of corrupt officials. The submarine crew's evidence had provided the foundation for criminal prosecutions that would continue for years. Admiral Morrison entered the hearing room wearing civilian clothes, his retirement having been accelerated following his decision to facilitate Elena's escape. His presence reminded everyone of the personal costs associated with challenging institutional corruption, even when that challenge ultimately served national interests. Chairman Williamson recognized Elena's role in catalyzing the exposure of the conspiracy. "Commander Vasquez, your refusal to accept false charges prevented a massive intelligence operation from continuing undetected. How do you want to proceed with your naval career?" Elena had spent weeks considering her future while the investigation unfolded around her. The submarine crews had been granted immunity in exchange for their cooperation, but her own position remained uncertain despite her complete vindication. "Chairman Williamson, I request assignment to the Naval War College as an instructor in military ethics and leadership." The lessons learned from this crisis need to be incorporated into the education of future naval officers. Captain Torres stood in the gallery, his expression showing approval of Elena's decision to remain in service, while focusing on prevention rather than revenge. The submarine crews had returned to their operational duties, their courage officially recognized through commendations and promotions. Elena's assignment to the war college would allow her to ensure that future officers understood the importance of challenging corruption regardless of personal cost. Her experience demonstrated that individual integrity could triumph over institutional corruption when supported by colleagues willing to risk everything for truth. The hearing concluded with bipartisan support for reforms that would prevent similar conspiracies while recognizing the extraordinary courage shown by personnel who had exposed the betrayal. Elena's story had become a testament to the power of integrity and the importance of standing up for principles even when facing overwhelming opposition. Admiral Hawthorne's trial would continue for months, but his conviction was assured by the overwhelming evidence provided by the submarine crews. Elena realized that her personal vindication was less important than the systematic changes that would protect future generations of naval personnel from similar corruption. The courage of 12 submarine crews had transformed a personal struggle for justice into a national reckoning with military corruption, proving that truth and integrity could triumph over even the most sophisticated conspiracies when supported by people willing to sacrifice everything for what was right. The lecture hall at the Naval War College in Newport fell silent as Elena concluded her presentation on military ethics, her words carrying the weight of lived experience rather than theoretical knowledge. 2 years had passed since the submarine crisis that had reshaped the Pacific Fleet, and her students, future naval officers from around the world, listened with the intensity of people understanding that such situations could define their own careers. Lieutenant Jessica Martinez raised her hand from the front row, her expression showing the earnest concern of someone grappling with complex moral questions. Commander Vasquez, how do you recognize when institutional loyalty conflicts with ethical duty? The line seems unclear in situations where evidence is ambiguous. Elena studied the faces of her students, recognizing the same uncertainty she had felt when first confronted with evidence that challenged everything she believed about naval integrity. These young officers would face similar decisions throughout their careers, and her responsibility was to prepare them for moments when courage would be their only guide. Lieutenant Martinez, institutional loyalty and ethical duty should never truly conflict because institutions are only as strong as the principles they uphold. When you encounter situations where following orders requires violating your conscience, that's usually a sign that someone has corrupted the institution rather than served it. Commander David Park, a South Korean exchange officer, leaned forward with obvious interest. Commander, the submarine crews who supported you risked court-martial to expose the truth. How do officers balance personal risk against potential benefits to the larger organization? Elena walked to the large display screen, showing organizational charts of naval command structures, her pointer highlighting the relationships that had enabled Admiral Hawthorne's conspiracy to flourish undetected. The visual representation helped students understand how corruption could spread through legitimate channels when oversight mechanisms failed. Commander Park, those submarine crews understood that their personal careers were less important than the integrity of the institution they served. They calculated that exposing corruption would strengthen the Navy even if it destroyed their own professional prospects. The classroom discussion was interrupted by Admiral Susan Carter, the new Pacific Fleet commander who had replaced Admiral Hawthorne following his conviction and imprisonment. Carter had implemented many of the reforms Elena had recommended during her congressional testimony, transforming how the Navy approached internal security and oversight. Commander Vasquez, I apologize for interrupting your class, but I have news that your students should hear as part of their education in military ethics. Elena gestured for Admiral Carter to join the discussion, understanding that real-world developments often provided the most valuable teaching opportunities. Her students straightened in their chairs, recognizing the significance of receiving information directly from Fleet Command. Admiral Carter, please share whatever information you believe would benefit our discussion of ethical leadership. Carter moved to the front of the classroom, her expression showing both satisfaction and continued concern about ongoing investigations. The Department of Justice has just announced the conviction of the final defendants in the Hawthorne conspiracy. 37 military and civilian personnel have been sentenced for their roles in the intelligence selling operation. Elena felt a sense of completion at the news that all participants in the conspiracy had finally been held accountable for their crimes. The investigation had continued for 2 years, methodically unraveling a network that had compromised American security while enriching corrupt officials. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun, Elena's former colleague who had been promoted following her role in exposing the conspiracy, entered the classroom carrying a folder of documents marked with official seals. Her presence suggested that additional developments were unfolding related to the case. Commander Vasquez, the Secretary of the Navy, has asked me to deliver these commendations for the submarine crews who participated in the exposure of the Hawthorne conspiracy. Their courage has been officially recognized with the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. Elena accepted the folder with deep satisfaction, knowing that the submarine crew's recognition was long overdue. Their willingness to risk everything for truth had prevented massive ongoing damage to national security while demonstrating the highest ideals of naval service. Admiral Carter, have the reforms implemented following the crisis been effective in preventing similar conspiracies? Commander Vasquez, the new oversight mechanisms have identified and prevented 3 potential corruption schemes before they could develop into operational threats. The lessons learned from your experience have literally saved lives and protected national security. Elena realized that her ordeal had generated lasting improvements in naval security that would protect future generations of service members. The submarine crew's courage had created systematic changes that made the Navy stronger and more resistant to corruption. Student questions continued for another hour, covering topics ranging from whistleblower protection to the psychological challenges of challenging authority. Elena recognized that these future officers were grappling with concepts that would shape their entire careers and potentially determine their responses to crisis situations. Commander Vasquez, asked Ensign Michael Torres, Captain Torres's son, who had followed his father into submarine service, do you regret the personal cost of challenging false charges? Your career was nearly destroyed despite your eventual vindication. Elena considered the question carefully, understanding that her answer would influence how these young officers approached similar situations. Ensign Torres, my career was never more valuable than my integrity or the lives of the sailors who depended on secure communication systems. The personal cost of fighting corruption was far less than the cost of allowing it to continue. The class concluded with Elena's traditional closing challenge to her students. Ladies and gentlemen, you will face moments in your careers when doing the right thing requires extraordinary courage. Remember that the strength of our institution depends on officers who choose principles over convenience, truth over comfort, and service over self-interest. As the students filed out of the classroom, Elena reflected on the transformation that had occurred since her arrest 2 years earlier. The conspiracy that had nearly destroyed her had ultimately strengthened both her character and the institution she served, proving that truth and integrity could triumph over even the most sophisticated corruption when supported by people willing to sacrifice for justice. Admiral Carter remained behind as the last students departed, her expression showing both respect and friendship that had developed during their work implementing naval reforms. Elena, the submarine crews are conducting joint exercises off the California coast next month. Captain Torres specifically requested that you observe their operations to verify that the new communication systems are functioning properly. Elena smiled at the invitation, understanding that the submarine crews wanted her to witness the successful implementation of reforms that had emerged from their collective courage. Their continued trust and friendship represented validation that transcended any official recognition or career advancement. The journey from accused traitor to respected educator had demonstrated that individual integrity could create lasting institutional change when supported by colleagues willing to stand together against corruption. Elena's story had become part of naval tradition, inspiring future officers to choose courage over comfort whenever truth and justice demanded their sacrifice. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beneath the setting sun as Elena stood on the observation deck of USS Independence, watching 12 submarines conduct the most sophisticated joint communication exercise in naval history. 3 years had passed since the crisis that had transformed both her life and the Pacific Fleet, and the sight of those same submarine crews working in perfect coordination filled her with profound satisfaction. Captain Torres approached from the bridge, his weathered face showing the contentment of a career submarine officer who had found peace with his decision to risk everything for truth. The Distinguished Service Medal on his uniform caught the evening light, a permanent reminder of courage that had changed the course of naval history. Commander Vasquez, the exercise has exceeded all performance expectations. The new communication protocols you helped design are functioning flawlessly, and the security measures have prevented any unauthorized access attempts. Elena watched the submarine formations maneuvering with precision that would have been impossible under the compromised systems Admiral Hawthorne had exploited. The reforms implemented after the conspiracy's exposure had created communication capabilities that enhanced both operational effectiveness and security integrity. Captain Torres, seeing these crews working together reminds me why we fought so hard to expose the truth. These sailors deserve systems they can trust and leaders who put their welfare above personal gain. The observation exercise was being monitored by international naval attaches and defense analysts who had come to study the revolutionary changes in submarine communication protocols. Elena's experience had become a case study taught in military academies worldwide, demonstrating how individual courage could catalyze institutional transformation. Admiral Carter joined them on the observation deck, her presence representing the new generation of naval leadership that had emerged following the crisis. Her command style emphasized transparency and accountability, creating an environment where potential corruption would be identified and eliminated before it could threaten operational security. Elena, the Pentagon has requested a comprehensive assessment of the reforms implemented over the past 3 years. Your evaluation will influence how other military branches approach internal security and corruption prevention. Elena understood that her role had evolved from victim to expert, her experience providing insights that could protect military personnel across all services. The systematic changes that had emerged from the submarine crisis were being adapted by the Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps to address similar vulnerabilities. Commander Rodriguez approached their group carrying a secure communication device, his expression showing the satisfaction of a career enlisted man who had seen justice prevail over corruption. His role in facilitating Elena's escape had been officially recognized, and his promotion to warrant officer demonstrated the Navy's commitment to rewarding integrity over rank. Commander Vasquez, we're receiving congratulations from submarine crews around the world. The international naval community has adopted many of our new protocols, creating a global standard for communication security. Elena realized that the courage of 12 submarine crews had influenced naval operations far beyond American waters. Their willingness to challenge corruption had inspired similar reforms in allied navies, creating international cooperation that strengthened Democratic naval forces worldwide. The communication exercise concluded as the submarines began their synchronized dive, their coordination demonstrating capabilities that would have been impossible under Admiral Hawthorne's compromised systems. Elena watched with pride as the crew she had worked with disappeared beneath the waves, knowing they were protected by systems designed with integrity rather than exploitation. Lieutenant Commander Chun approached from the communication center. Her promotion and assignment to Elena's former position, representing continuity between the old corruption and the new integrity. Her presence ensured that the lessons learned from the crisis would be preserved and transmitted to future generations of naval officers. Elena, the final report on Admiral Hawthorne's financial network has been completed. The investigation documented $12 million in payments to corrupt officials, but also revealed that our exposure of the conspiracy prevented an additional $50 million in planned intelligence sales. Elena understood that their actions had prevented massive ongoing damage to national security, while creating systematic improvements that would protect future operations. The submarine crew's courage had generated benefits, far exceeding the risks they had accepted when choosing to surface in her defense. As darkness settled over the Pacific, Elena reflected on the transformation that had occurred since her arrest 3 years earlier. The conspiracy that had threatened to destroy her had ultimately strengthened both her character and the institution she served, demonstrating that truth and integrity could triumph over sophisticated corruption when supported by people willing to sacrifice for justice. The lights of the submarine fleet disappeared beneath the waves, leaving only the gentle sound of ocean swells against the ship's hull. Elena realized that her journey from accused traitor to respected educator had proven that individual courage could create lasting institutional change when amplified by colleagues willing to stand together against corruption. Admiral Carter placed a hand on Elena's shoulder, her gesture conveying both respect and friendship that had developed through their shared commitment to naval reform. Elena, your story has become part of our tradition now. Every new class of submarine officers learns about the importance of choosing integrity over convenience. Elena smiled as she considered the legacy that had emerged from her ordeal. Future generations of naval officers would understand that challenging corruption required courage, but that such courage could transform entire institutions when supported by people willing to risk everything for truth. The Pacific Fleet had become stronger, more secure, and more trustworthy because 12 submarine crews had chosen to surface in defense of an officer they believed was innocent. Their extraordinary action had demonstrated that the bonds between military personnel could overcome even the most sophisticated attempts to destroy integrity through false accusations. Elena's experience had proven that individual resistance to corruption could catalyze systematic change when supported by colleagues who understood that institutional strength depended on personal integrity. The submarine crew's courage had created reforms that would protect countless future personnel while ensuring that truth would always emerge. When people were willing to sacrifice for justice, the ocean that had once threatened to become her grave had instead become the setting for her greatest triumph, proving that courage and integrity could transform even the most desperate situations into opportunities for lasting positive change. 5 years later, Elena stood before the largest graduating class in Naval War College history, her final lecture as an instructor drawing to a close. The auditorium was packed with future submarine commanders from 17 nations, all learning lessons forged in the depths of crisis and tempered by unwavering courage. The 12 submarines that surfaced to save me didn't just rescue one officer, Elena concluded, her voice carrying across the silent hall. They rescued the integrity of our entire institution. They proved that when good people stand together, corruption cannot survive. A standing ovation erupted as Captain Torres entered the auditorium. Now Admiral Torres, his promotion earned through reforms he had helped implement across the global submarine fleet. Behind him walked the other 11 submarine commanders, their presence a powerful reminder that courage compounds when shared among those who refuse to compromise their principles. Today, those same communication systems protect submarine crews in every ocean. Elena continued as the applause subsided. The reforms we fought for have prevented 17 additional corruption schemes across 4 nations. Your predecessor's courage created the secure world you'll inherit. Admiral Torres stepped to the podium, his weathered face showing the satisfaction of a career spent serving truth rather than convenience. Commander Vasquez taught us that individual integrity can move mountains, or in our case, entire submarine fleets. Never forget that your character is your most powerful weapon. Elena looked out at the sea of young faces, knowing that her story would guide them through their own moments of testing. Remember, when you're faced with choosing between career and conscience, between orders and ethics, between silence and truth, choose courage. Choose integrity. Choose to surface, even when the depths seem safer. The legacy of 12 submarines that broke protocol to save 1 officer would live on in every graduate who chose principle over convenience, proving that truth, like submarines, always finds a way to surface. If this story of courage and integrity inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible, true stories that prove ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. Hit that notification bell and join our community of over 2 million subscribers who believe that truth and justice will always prevail. What would you have done in Elena's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Like this video if it moved you, and remember, your story of courage might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.